What if you could build some seriously complex real-time apps without ever thinking about servers or containers or microservices ever again? Today, we're going to dive into a technology that's making that exact promise. It's called SpacetimeDB, and it's aiming for nothing less than development at the speed of light. I mean, just let that sink in for a second. That is an incredibly bold statement. This isn't about a small, incremental improvement. This is a promise to just eliminate pretty much the entire modern backend stack. And this quote, it comes straight from the creators of a totally new kind of database called SpacetimeDB. So to really understand why that promise is so massive, we have to be real about what it's like for most developers today. Honestly, building even a simple multiplayer application can feel like you're just lost, trying to navigate this crazy, complex maze. You've got your application logic over here, a whole separate database over there, a web server in the middle to handle requests. Then you've got to wrap everything in containers like Docker, manage all those with something like Kubernetes, and on top of all that, you need a dedicated DevOps or Ops team just to keep the lights on. It's a huge amount of overhead before you've even written a single important feature for your users. Okay, so SpacetimeDB looks at that entire mess and proposes something, well, radical, a total simplification. Instead of adding yet another tool to the pile, its whole goal is to replace a massive chunk of it with a fundamentally different way of thinking. At its core, the idea is almost breathtakingly simple. What if the database was the server, right? What if you could just upload your application logic directly into the database and let your clients talk securely right to it? Well, that's the whole idea behind SpacetimeDB. Okay, look at this, because it says it all. On the left, that's the standard architecture we all know. The client talks to a web server, which then talks to a database. But look at the right. The web server and the database, they just collapse into one single box. The client connects directly to SpacetimeDB, which holds both the data and all your application logic. The middleman is just gone. So the big question is, how is this even possible? Without totally sacrificing performance or security? Well, the whole architecture is built on a few really key principles. First, for crazy low latency, all of the application state is held directly in memory, blazing fast. Now, to make sure you don't lose any data, every single change is saved to something called a write-ahead log. You can think of it like a super resilient to-do list for the database, so nothing ever gets dropped. All your backend code, it gets packaged up and uploaded as a module. And this is crucial. Your security, your authorization logic, it all lives right there inside the module, just like it would in a normal server. The creators have a pretty good way of thinking about these modules. They say to think of them as super-powered or fancy stored procedures. They even draw a parallel to smart contracts because the logic and the state are so tightly connected. But, and this is a really important point, SpacetimeDB has nothing to do with blockchain, and it's designed from the ground up to be orders of magnitude faster, built for real-time applications. Now, all this sounds amazing in theory, right? But does it actually work for something, really demanding and complex? Well, it turns out the most compelling evidence comes from a project that pushes the absolute limits of real-time performance. And get this isn't some little demo or a toy project. BitCraft Online is a full-scale, persistent sandbox MMORPG. And its entire backend, yep, it runs as one single SpacetimeDB module. Just think about what that actually means. There are no other services. None. All the game logic, I'm talking everything from chat messages and what's in a player's inventory to the real-time location of every single person in the world. It's all processed directly by the database and synchronized out to every client. It's just a massive proof point that this model can really scale. Okay, so a massive online game can run on this architecture. That's cool, but what does that really mean for you, the developer? How does this get us back to that original promise of light-speed development? Well, it all comes down to focus and simplicity. Here's the result. You get to write your entire application, your logic, your data definitions, the whole shebang, in a single language like Rust, and then you deploy it as a single binary file. All that complexity, that entire maze we saw earlier, it just disappears. And if you take a quick peek under the hood, you can see this thing is built for performance. I mean, with over half of the core written in Rust, it is crystal clear that speed and safety are the absolute top priorities here. And the best part is that this isn't some far-off academic idea. You can actually get started with it right now, and the process is incredibly straightforward. It really just boils down to 4 steps. First, you install their command line tool. Then, you start a local database node right on your machine. Third, you write your backend logic in a module. And finally, you just connect to it from your client application. That's it. Your entire backend is up and running. All of this leads us to a really fascinating final thought. By merging the server and the database into a single high-performance system, architectures like SpacetimeDB are forcing us to ask a pretty big question. Are we actually looking at the beginning of the end for the traditional backend server?